life. David, all the biographies you've done are of people who are no longer living. Have you ever considered doing a biography of someone still alive, and what challenges would that, present?
Hey,
Is that something?
you didn't get that letter from your agent? No, you know what? I mean, come on. I mean, it's bad enough when they're long gone.
Yeah.
I would think when they're alive. I mean, you tell me, because you've done that. I couldn't
I
imagine.
have done that. I have
couldn't
done that. I
imagine.
mean, I think the thing is that, and again, it goes to the question of, do you like them or not?
Mm-hmm.
But you sort of have to. I mean, I think of Joe McGinnis doing the Jeffrey McDonald book, and sort of discovering halfway through that he didn't think that Jeffrey McDonald was innocent, that he in fact had committed the murder, and so he took the story where it wanted to go, or where it led him, and so I think that's that obviously becomes much more complicated with somebody who's alive.
Right. Well, I mean, look, the paradigm for me is you that we're going through right now is listen to the voice on the tapes with Bob Woodward. This is a voice of someone who thinks he's running the show, who thinks he's writing the book, who thinks it's his book, who doesn't even acknowledge that there is a person there called Bob Woodward. Not really. Bob Woodward is there as merely as a reflection of his own greatness, because Bob Woodward is the Babe Ruth of reporters. So yeah, he gets the biggest reporter, and now that guy sits there like a jerk. And in fact, when Bob Woodward reveals himself, even a bit more than Bob Woodward seems to be revealing himself, actually makes a moral point in his own right as a human being, the voice can't even hear it. It just goes right. So that's to me the exaggerated version of what everybody who would be working with a writer on their own biography is doing, which is pretending to themselves that they somehow have control over this.
That's right.
And I mean, I've always said this about biography in general, whether it's about a living person or dead person, but you do have to deal with the living. And especially if you're dealing with a widow, or you're dealing with children who have the rights to, a bunch of letters you need, or diaries, or even simply permission to quote from a writer's writings or something. If the biography is a quantity of 100 units of power, and the people, the widow or the children, have the 100 units all to themselves at the start, for the book to be the best book it can be, at least 99 of those units have to be transferred in the process to the writer to write that book. And in a way, Ray's example of Jane Levy on Sandy Koufax is probably a good example, which is, it's much better for the writer, not to have known, or to have seen, or even to be talking to the subject of the biography, because in a way it's harder, I think, to own it yourself and to take possession of it. I mean, one of the great problems for me, Eleanor Roosevelt, and one of the reasons I chose Eleanor Roosevelt, was because she left all her papers to you and me, to the American people. And I wanted to do a non-access biography. I did not want the drama of the book to be around access, or even a selling point of the book to be around access. I wanted simply to have a close relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt herself, without her children or grandchildren. God bless them, lovely people, no problems there. I'm just saying I wanted to know her myself, because I felt the reader would then get the point of the book, which is, now you know her. And so I really felt liberated, both at first, little at sea, but I really, really strongly felt that in the end, I had 99 units of power from Eleanor. And I had a day when I kind of had a breakthrough. She was a lot like climbing a mountain where mist descends, and then suddenly it's bright, sunny, and then the clouds come over. I don't know if you've ever been up in high altitudes hiking around, but the way the weather can change is just beyond belief. It also happens out at sea. But that was a lot of how Eleanor was. I mean, she herself, very hard to know, withdrew, came forward. So the day of my biggest breakthrough was realizing, because I, as a child, had heard my mother and all my mother's generation and people in general calling her Mrs. Roosevelt. And in fact, even Paul Simon began writing a song called this here's to you, Mrs. Roosevelt. Nation turns its lonely eyes to you. Well, he presented that by contract to Mike Nichols, director of The Graduate, who was looking for a soundtrack and he said, it's not Mrs. Roosevelt anymore, it's Mrs. Robinson. So they just changed the name. But Mrs. Roosevelt was the name in my ear. Mrs. R, her close friends called her. ER, one biographer had called her. None of it worked for me. I hardly knew how to put her name on the page when I was writing, because, in journalism, after the first introduction, it becomes shorthanded by the last name. But I couldn't call her Roosevelt. But that didn't make any sense. That sounded to me like her husband, but not her. I finally allowed myself to call her Eleanor when I realized that men in her life had disappointed her, even betrayed her in the end, because they hadn't been able to become intimate and call her what she wanted to be called, which was Eleanor. Mm-hmm. People couldn't do that. Her closest, her nearest and dearest, finally the man she fell in love with at the end of her life, her doctor, he couldn't bring himself to call her Mrs. Roosevelt. He had his reasons, but I thought, wow, what am I doing here? Why am I still calling her this in my head, Mrs. Roosevelt? So the minute I started calling her Eleanor, and that's why there's no subtitle, is I thought, that's who she is. Now I know. This is who this woman is.